When my husband Leo told me he'd accepted the transfer, I promised myself we'd finally start over somewhere quiet, somewhere our past couldn't follow. For years, we'd chased stability through cramped apartments and unreliable landlords, saving every spare dollar until we could afford a home that felt like our own. When we moved into Cedar Bluff Estates, tucked between rolling Georgia hills, it seemed like we'd found that peace. The brochure promised a community built on trust and order. I remember laughing at that line, thinking it sounded quaint, even wholesome. I didn't realize then that order can have a price. But before I go on, tell me, have you ever moved somewhere that felt perfect at first? The first month was golden. Mornings smelled of honeysuckle and wet grass, and the neighbors smiled too wide when they passed. Leo spent weekends repainting the porch while I planned a garden out back. I was 5 months pregnant and still humming with energy, my hands constantly brushing against the small swell of life beneath my ribs. Every night, Leo would press his ear against me, grinning at the faint rhythm of our daughter's heartbeat. For the first time in years, I believed we'd done everything right, until the day the truck rolled up. 2 figures in khaki uniforms stepped out, both wearing shiny gold badges that caught the sunlight. One was broad-shouldered and spoke like he'd rehearsed every word. "Routine community inspection," he said. "We've received notice of code irregularities on your property." The other, thinner and quieter, scribbled something on a clipboard without looking up. "Irregularities?" Leo asked, puzzled. "We haven't changed a thing." The first man smiled without warmth. "Anonymous reports. Happens all the time." His tone made my skin prickle. I glanced at his badge again. It looked like something printed at a copy shop. My pulse quickened, but Leo's hand found mine. "It's fine," he murmured, though I felt the tension in his grip. The taller man adjusted his cap, eyes flicking toward the nursery window. I caught the faintest hint of satisfaction before they turned to leave. And that was the moment the perfect life we'd built began to tremble, just slightly at its foundation. So I did what he asked. They wandered behind the house for a few minutes, tapping their clipboards and muttering as if taking inventory of ghosts. When they left, a bright orange tag fluttered on our door handle. "Warning, unapproved. Auxiliary structure, storage. Unit." The so-called storage unit had been there long before we moved in, painted the same soft gray as the house. I assumed it was an administrative error and sent an email to the community, board with photos attached. 2 days later, another slip appeared. "Violation. Decorative mailbox not in compliance." Then another. "Lawn overgrowth beyond 3 inches. Each notice bore the same signature. Officer M. Griggs. When I brought the stack to the next community meeting, the chairwoman, Sylvia Crane, smiled with a kind of polite condescension that made my stomach turn. "Our enforcement team is simply diligent," she said smoothly. "If they've made a mistake, it will be corrected." But her eyes told me no mistake would ever be acknowledged. After that, the beige utility truck began appearing more often, idling by our curb long after sunset. Leo noticed it too. One night, while folding laundry, he murmured, "They're not inspecting anything. They're watching." I tried to laugh it off, but the sound felt hollow. Something unseen was winding tighter around us. The next visit came just after dawn, light still blue and uncertain. I was in the garden, watering the hydrangeas, when I heard gravel crackle. Same truck, same 2 men. This time they didn't even pretend to knock. The tall one, Griggs, jumped, down with a clipboard tucked under one arm and a crowbar glinting in his other hand. His partner trailed behind, scrolling idly on his phone. Leo stepped out from the porch, jaw tight. "What's this about now?" Griggs's grin was slow and deliberate. "Final action. You ignored prior notices? That unauthorized structure's coming down today." Leo squared his shoulders. "You don't have that kind of authority. The shed was inspected before we bought this place." His voice didn't waver. "Touch it, and you'll be trespassing." Griggs's expression flickered, something between amusement and warning. The air felt heavy, charged with the kind of silence that always comes before something breaks. Griggs gave a low, mocking laugh. "You think your pretty little rules mean anything to us?" he sneered. That's when it broke. He lunged forward and slammed both hands into Leo's chest. The force sent him sprawling backward off the porch, landing flat on his back in the gravel. I heard the dull thud, the rush of air leaving his lungs, And then my own scream tore through the quiet morning. "Stop!" I shouted, but Griggs was already climbing the steps toward me. "Move aside, lady, before you make this worse," he barked, seizing my wrist and shoving me sideways. I hit the wooden railing, pain slicing through my hip as the watering can rolled off the edge and clattered to the ground below. Instinctively, my hand went to my stomach, panic flooding every nerve. Leo's voice cracked through the air. "Get your hands off her!" He was on his feet again, eyes blazing. But Griggs didn't stop. He reached toward me. Maybe to drag me off the porch. Maybe just to prove he could. I never had the chance to find out. Leo's legally registered pistol, kept for home. Protection was already in his hand, drawn with the precision of someone who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in nightmares. "Step back," he warned, steady as stone. For the briefest moment, everything froze. The insects, the breeze, even the sound of birds. Then Griggs twisted halfway toward him, the metal bar still clutched in his grip. 2 shots cracked through the air. The first struck his leg. The second grazed his shoulder. The tool fell, bouncing against the porch before spinning into the dirt. His partner stumbled back, hands shaking, repeating, "I didn't sign up for this. I didn't sign up for this." Leo kept the weapon, trained on both of them while I fumbled for my phone, fingers trembling. "This is Cedar Bluff Estates," I told the dispatcher. "Armed trespassers, 1 down. I'm pregnant. Please send medical now." By the time deputies arrived, flashing lights washing the house in red and blue, it looked like a scene torn from a nightmare. I sat on the steps, clutching my side as paramedics checked my pulse. The baby's heartbeat was strong, steady. The man Leo shot lay on the ground, his leg bound in a makeshift tourniquet, groaning beneath the weight of his own arrogance. I stood by the porch steps, hands visible, the pistol resting on the table beside a half-spilled glass of water, slide locked open. "Ma'am, step back," the senior officer commanded. I nodded, slow and steady. "Weapons cleared," I said. They moved efficiently, collecting the crowbar that still lay near the railing before detaining. Griggs's partner, who wouldn't stop shouting, "We're authorized! This is community enforcement!" The lead officer, a woman named Sergeant Hale, turned toward me. "You're the property owner?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Do you have documentation for that firearm?" I reached for my wallet and handed over both my carry, license and proof of registration. She checked the numbers, then gave a short nod. "Appreciate your cooperation. We'll hold this as evidence until the prosecutor reviews your statement." My breath came slow. "He attacked my husband," I said quietly. "I fired to stop him." Hale's tone softened just slightly. "Under Georgia Code 16321, that's lawful defense, protection of another from bodily harm." They photographed everything: the overturned chair, the broken flower pots, the splintered edge of the porch where the struggle began. Leo stood beside me, one arm around my shoulders. By late afternoon, the sheriff himself pulled up, boots crunching over the gravel. "Mr. and Mrs. DeLange," he said, "we've reviewed your camera feed. You're clear. Those men weren't acting under any legitimate authority." The real neighborhood board confirmed. They'd never sent inspectors that day. A week later, the story hit local news. Griggs survived surgery but left the hospital in cuffs, charged with aggravated assault, criminal trespass, and attempted destruction of private property. His partner turned state witness. But what came next cut deeper. Investigators uncovered that Sylvia Crane, the board chair, had authorized those visits off the books, promising the men cash bonuses for compliance recoveries. Text messages, payment records, the proof was undeniable. When the district attorney was done, 5 members faced conspiracy and fraud charges. The association's insurer refused to cover deliberate misconduct, leaving them personally liable for every cent. 3 weeks later, our attorney filed a civil suit, unlawful entry, assault, emotional trauma. They settled quietly once the evidence became public, and for the first time in months, the nights in Cedar Bluff were still. The community's attorney called it the quickest implosion our county had ever seen. Within days, the DeLanges received a settlement of $190,000, enough to cover medical costs, legal fees, and the months of sleepless nights that had followed. Cedar Bluff Estates officially disbanded 2 weeks later. Sylvia Crane resigned live on the evening news. tears streaking, her makeup as she insisted she never intended for anyone to get hurt, the sheriff told Leo privately that Griggs's security license had been revoked for life. "He won't even get hired to guard a parking lot now," he said. That evening, after the last of the legal paperwork was signed, Leo and I stood on the porch as the sun dipped below the tree line. I looked down at the boards, new ones, freshly sanded where the old had splintered during the struggle. The yard was silent again, wind sliding through the hydrangeas, cicadas humming low and steady. No trucks, no engines idling in the dark, just stillness. I felt Leo's hand find mine, warm and steady. For the first time in months, I believed peace wasn't something we had to buy. It was something we had finally earned. And as I turned the porch light off and latched the gate, I promised myself that if anyone ever came to our door claiming authority again, they'd think twice before crossing that fence line.